Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And welcome to Friday Night Lights. Today we have a special guest. First of all, we have Sheikh Ibrahim and myself. And today we have Sheikh Yusuf Jarudi, who, of course, everybody know. I mean, a lot of you know him. He's from the community, grew up in this community. And he is an accomplished young man. He's a lawyer. What's your specialty again now?
Currently, as of the date of this video.
Because every time I talk to you, it changes. What are you doing
well, we
now?
keep learning.
All right, good man.
All right, we can't stay stagnant. Right now, so far, it's real estate, and I'm interested in business law as well.
Not probate?
Real estate and interest in business law. And
Still,
Did you do that
and
too?
I'm still interested in that as well.
probate. And what did you, and
And I have extensive knowledge, like Sheikh Ibrahim is saying, in probate, which is, inheritance and,
Yeah.
before and after you pass away.
okay, very good. Very nice. So that's because today's topic is lifelong learning. So we're gonna talk about continuous learning, like you're learning. You don't stop because you left school, kind of like what Imam Ahmad said, rahimahullah. He said, مع المحبرة إلى المقبرة. The mihbara is his, like his ink pen and his ink pot.
Right.
And he always had it. And he said, with this, I'll go with this to my grave. إلى المقبرة. Take it all the way to the grave. Constantly learning, constantly writing, constantly, improving and increasing in wisdom and in knowledge. So this is what we're talking about, and we want to also touch upon things like reading, how to make time for reading, how to read a book, and how to understand and retain some of the material that you read, how to make time for reading. One of the things that is interesting about you is that you speak Mandarin Chinese.
Correct.
Yes, and everybody's dying to hear something in Mandarin Chinese. So please.
Oh, right now?
Yes, sir.
Oh. 你们好，我叫龙律师。我自学了中文6、7年，我真喜欢中国人的文化，每天练习我的中文跟中国人，我现在是个律师，我的工作就在中国城。
And it sounds wise. You could be saying, I'm going to have rice with soy sauce, but everyone's like, mashallah, that's some wisdom right there. Which and some people just feel like watching a kung fu movie right now. Everyone has a different... Very nice. What was the process? Like, what made you... First of all, why Mandarin Chinese? And then you learned it right here in Texas, or you went to Shanghai for half a year?
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So definitely learned it right here. Okay.
So it can be done.
It can be done.
All right.
And the process, subhanallah, my father, he went to China for a business trip. And he came back with a teapot. And it had Chinese inscriptions on it. The characters. And, my sister and I, we looked at it. And we were intrigued. We said, subhanallah, what is this?
Nice.
So from there, I remember the very first time we went to just a random free website teaching you the numbers and basic words, mother, father, table. And we started learning how to read, speak, write, and pretty much anything, we just started from there.
Nice.
And then we self-studied together. So you need to have a partner. You need to have a partner. And then from there, we just, everything added on. After that, we started going to Chinatown very frequently, talking to the waiter in the restaurant, talking to random grandmothers and grandfathers in the grocery store, talking to random people, right? Within reason, of course, and taking a course in college, just as an add-on. It's not from the course, it's
Gotcha.
as an add-on.
All right.
Speaking with your neighbors. Lots of our neighbors were Chinese, from China. So we speak with the neighbors, we traded vegetables. I'll give you a tomato, you give me a cucumber. And we started, every time we practice.
And that's acceptable, huh? Just knock on the door like, I've got a tomato. What do you have?
Well, we shared the fence.
Okay,
so
good.
I look over there and they look at me, and we have each gardens. And then we say, La quwwata illa billah,
Okay, that's different. So like from the gardening vegetables.
Right.
You don't go to Kroger and come back with...
No.
All right, great.
And then I actually went to, they have a Sunday school. And I said, I will learn Chinese with you guys, but I'm not going to partake in any worship or anything like that. They have a class, a course, free, and you come. And so we took part in that. We just, pure just language learning,
Wow.
And then once they told us, come into the prayer area and listen to the about Jesus, I said, okay, I'm out.
What's astaghfirullah in Chinese?
I'm not sure.
Just kidding. Very nice. You know what? I got my kids this app called it's called Chinesey, and it's such a good app. But the problem is, like, you got to be consistent. So every time they start with lesson 1, then I ask them da zhen, and they're like zhen. Oh, you forget every time. Yeah, Munti's here, and he forgot too. Right? Okay, very good. All right. welcome, Yusuf Jarudi. All right, Sheikh Ibrahim, you're an avid reader. Just as a disclaimer, like people, there's a rumor that I read a book a week. I don't. But you're the avid reader here, besides Yusuf. So what's your technique? First of all, let's start with this. It's not even about just reading a book cover to cover. First, let's start with choosing the book. How do you know this is a good book? There's some good techniques here. How do you start? How do you know it's a good book?
Oh. Well, let's just start with why do you need to read? Why do you need to learn?
That's probably even before the book.
This is really important, really. Why you need to read and learn, Again, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. You know how difficult it is to be ignorant. It's really difficult. And you are left behind in many things. So ignorance stings. It makes you feel bad. It's not good for your self-esteem. It puts you down. It makes you feel horrible to be ignorant about something. And especially when you're asked by your child and you say, well, I don't know. Or when your child knows more than you do. That becomes really a challenge. So reading can solve a lot of these problems. And now when you want to choose a book to read, that is a challenge as well. So what do you need? Now you find yourself in your 30s, you graduated, you probably had a degree in whatever it is, and you probably forgot everything about what you learned. You probably mastered some skills to get by a career, do some job, and bring a decent income. But then when you go to sit with some people, you cannot really hold an intellectual conversation. You don't know how to speak. You use the same vocabulary over and over and over. You don't know any new words. So there are so many things that people will say, we can't really enjoy a conversation with you because, what do you want to talk about? Hamburgers? McDonald's? Talk about, silly stuff. It's boring. And it becomes really, you become a person that is not desired to have a conversation. So for me, reading is a necessity because, first of all, I'm an imam and I really need to learn. If you are an imam in a masjid, you are continuously challenged. You are asked questions all the time, so you need to learn. You need to read. You need to study. You need to have these books and just hit them and read them. Even sometimes you need to read a book that you really don't want to read, but because you're challenged about something and you find yourself reading that book. So the necessity is overwhelming. Anywhere you are, you couldn't, I'm an imam and I'm a teacher, so I find myself needing to read all the time. All the time. I cannot afford to say to a student, I don't know, even though it's okay to say I don't know. But when you have the question that is so simple and you say I don't know, that is silly, right? So it really is a necessity for you. It's like breathing. It's like breathing, really. They say what is better than reading while eating is eating while reading, they say. So both of them. Anyway, it's like breathing, honestly. They say, there's a quote actually I heard. You know why you need to read? Because you need to love reading, so you won't lose it. We don't lose breathing, but nobody loves breathing because it's just a common thing, right? You don't have a love relationship with breathing, right? So it needs to become like breathing for you.
Okay, very good.
Well, I think also to add on that, to start reading, and like he said exactly, and subhanAllah, I had the same thought. You need to know why you're reading in the first place.
Right.
And so one day, I went on YouTube recently, and I said, I just want to see what's out there, the new content on how to memorize the Quran. Maybe some new techniques, maybe someone will have some new techniques that will benefit me. And subhanAllah, I thought, I was looking for something, read this page 20 times, and then, the page before 20 times, and then together 40 times. This was what I was thinking. But this sheikh, he did not say that. In the video titled, Why or How to Memorize the Quran, he said, first and foremost, you need to know what will help you memorize the Quran is to know why you're memorizing the Quran.
Right.
And I was taken aback. Look, the first time somebody is saying this on like a public forum. So bottom line, he said, I remember the hadith, اقرأ وارتق. Read and your ranks will be elevated in the hereafter. You read from memory everything that you know, and the last of your fuel is the last ayah you know. And then that's the level you're going to enter in Jannah. Whenever he remembers this, that's why he memorizes.
That's a motivation for
him.
Yes, it's a great
and so
motivation.
He's going to use everything he can, and he's going to read, and he's going to do, and he's going to,
That's excellent. And that's probably something that the Quran teacher should put in the students.
Yeah.
Because some parents, they want the child to be a hafiz. He doesn't know what's going on. They drop him off, and he starts, maybe yelling in some cases, and that's it. So he doesn't know what he's in for. We took over this Quran class, and basically the first lesson was why the Quran, what is the Quran, what's special about the Quran, benefits in this life and the next life. So at least maybe you can change their motivation a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, I don't know, when people don't read, it's a disaster. And your knowledge, even though it could be kind of widespread, it's never deep. So today people watch a 4 or 5 minute video on YouTube and they think they're experts on whatever it is. I'll never forget, I had this friend and he would say, we were teenagers, and he would say, I can fly a helicopter. I said, have you flown a helicopter? He said, no. This is back when they had cassette tapes. He said, I bought these cassette tapes on how to fly a helicopter and I watched them very carefully. So this guy thinks he can just fire it up and just keep it in the air and fly because he watched the video. And it happens all the time. Like I said this before on Friday Night Lights. One of my doctor friends was telling me, like, one of the things we're suffering with is that people come in, I tell them what they have, and they look me right in the eye and they say no. Because they went on WebMD, they read a few articles, they watched some videos, and they can diagnose themselves. So you don't need to be an expert anymore. Everybody knows everything. But there's a difference between that and reading a whole book on a topic. Now, I wanted to share, first of all, like if you're reading about Islamic knowledge, there's some classical books that's my reading list. You can't move forward without knowing the classical books. So that's kind of easy when it comes to Islamic studies. But I'm reading about any particular topic. How do I know what's a good book in this field? Sometimes, like, you'll have a famous author, and then you'll just grab whatever he, like Malcolm Gladwell, for example, just grab his stuff, read it, enjoy it, or you may not. But you'll know that, this is one of the leading writers in this particular field. There's also another technique that someone uses. He says, I go into Amazon and or any other site that has the reviews for the book. And when I'm trying to buy a book, I'll see which book has so many or the most reviews. And to think that, let's say 180 people took time out of their day to write something about that book versus 50 for the other book, that means there must be something about this book that got that many people moved enough to make sure they write some review. So that was his technique. Pick a random topic, and then he would go in and see which book has a lot of reviews, and then he would read some of the reviews, and that many people gave up time to write something about this book. It must have affected them in one way or another.
But it depends on who's writing the reviews, because it could be anyone. And by the way, publishers go and write reviews to market their books. So you really need to go and find who's writing the reviews, and if that person is an expert in the topic and praising that book, then that must be a good book. But if you find 180 people writing reviews and they're all fives, you have to understand that it might be a publisher in the middle trying to market that book.
Like the publisher is going to write 100 reviews?
I can tell you there are books that have no reviews at all, but they're probably better than any book you can have.
That's true. It is a technique. I personally, I can smell a publisher's review. I can smell it. I don't care what anyone says. There's something so fake about it.
Right. So,
by the way, there's something else that some academics use where it's not very known, but one of them will write a book, and then others will reference their book in their book, and that pumps that book up.
Yeah.
So that also happens. So you do kind of have to be a little careful.
Speaking of Malcolm Gladwell that he mentioned, didn't he mention the 10,000 hour rule?
Yeah.
So again, even though you're picking up a book, but you don't want to pick. I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't want to be too random. Maybe focus on one topic if you want to be deep and you don't want to scratch the surface like you're saying. Okay, so you want to learn about, subject X, carpentry or something. Okay, you need to read multiple books and you need to put lots of hours. You need to be eating, sleeping, and repeating every day. I mean, that's my technique. One goal at a time.
Okay.
So here's what I do.
Let's talk about techniques.
Let me tell you, what I do is, I don't read one book at a time. I read 5-6 books together. And it may take a long time. It may take about 3-4 months to finish these 5 or maybe more.
Why do you read 5 at a time?
Okay, I get intrigued. I had a book, I found actually that book, it was like a serendipity, like you come across a treasure, a book that was buried somewhere. Nobody actually, by the way, serendipity is a treasure that you come to find accidentally. That's a good word for you to learn, right? So you find it, and I stumbled upon it, and I started reading it, and I found it extremely interesting. And he's in the book. The book is called "The Case for a Creator," as opposed to evolution. Okay, so that's what got me into reading everything about evolution and wanting to know more. So what I did, he interviewed 6 scholars, and these 6 scholars summarized their books in that one book. I read the whole book, and in order for me to get more, I went and bought all of these books that they summarized. I bought 5 books, and I started reading them.
So you have 5 books, but they're on the same topic.
They're not the same topic. They're
related.
One about microbiology.
Okay.
The other was about the physics of the universe, relativity and things. So I had to go by the history of time and read it. All the other things. So 5 books together, and I didn't read all of them. Some of them are very, very, extensive, but I needed to have an idea. So I had to go and read these books, and I follow sometimes a summarized way of reading a book. So it can give me a good idea. So this is a way of, getting yourself into reading multiple books at the same time to help you understand a topic and become, let's say, educated about it rather than ignorant and just accept whatever the mass media tells you or whatever you hear, right? This is the problem. If you don't read, you are enslaved by the people who read.
Okay. I actually use that, and this is a known technique. Well, you read more than one book at a time, and I do it, but they're completely different topics. So you're reading on one topic until you start to a little bit get bored with it.
It's not one topic.
I know.
It's a multifaceted topic.
Yeah.
That it intrigues you to, branch out.
Yeah. For me, they'll be completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So it's like taking a breather or just taking a break. So I'll read one book, then I put a bookmark in it, then I move on to the next book.
That's it.
But actually, like for example, there was, when I was preparing for my da'wah class, I read every book you could find.
Right?
No, actually, that was part of it. But any book on human behavior, persuasion, emotional intelligence,
communication.
You can walk into Barnes and Noble, pick any book, and I had read it. And then I was getting on the plane to go. I was giving the first class in Australia. I was getting on the plane to go, and I walked into a bookstore. Said, "Let's see if there's any new book." And there was a book that just came out, and I read it on the plane. And I remember hating that book so much. I bet you it wasn't a bad book, but this is my personal gauge for one. I don't think you can ever read enough, but I'm using enough between quotations. Yeah. So when I sense that I've read enough is when I pick up a brand new book on the same topic, and I read it and I don't learn anything new. And that's why I hated that book, because there was nothing new in it. Everything they wrote in it I had read somewhere else, and it was khalas, like this book was useless.
This is a good point, to recognize that there's a good book and there is no good book, is that sometimes books repeat what other books say.
So
you really need to get to the original book that began and get from there. And all the others, they're just copying what the original author came up with.
So this class is, or not the class, but this in the talk is about lifelong learning. And Sheikh Ammar, he texted us and he posed a few questions just for us to exercise our thoughts. And one of those was, what are the pathways, the multiple pathways? I think reading is one pathway. Right? Reading is one pathway, but there's auditory,
right?
And there is visual, right? Some people learn not by reading, but by auditory and by visual. And some people learn through writing, and some people learn through experiential, which means by experience and by observation. And talaqi, So I remember once I met with Sheikh Walid, and he told me he memorized a certain portion of the Quran by writing. And actually I did that with maybe a third as well. We were comparing notes. And then I know a brother from this masjid, he memorized the Quran through listening, going to and from U of H. And you all know him, but I'm not gonna, for privacy. But he memorized, I think, 2/3 of the Quran like that.
Have you seen that mushaf that's written in grayed out ink, and then you just trace over it?
No, but I've heard about people like writing their own mushaf and then using that to memorize.
So I mean, speaking of writing, you can combine both reading and writing by taking notes while you read.
Annotations.
That's a very good way of retaining information from the book.
Question for both. Have you ever read a book more than once?
Yes.
Have you?
Yes.
It's normal, right?
Multiple times.
It's normal, multiple times. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, do you write on your books at all?
I do.
You do? You mark?
100%.
Really?
I must.
I note it,
I must have a.
So I don't write on I don't let anyone touch or dog ear any of my pages. I have pads, sticky pads. They go in there. And sometimes like for example, sometimes they go based on color, and each color means something to me. And then I write on the pad. I write the thoughts on the pad, or sometimes an external notebook.
I think about it differently. You know, when I write on a book, it becomes personal. That book becomes a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's true.
I don't make friends with paper, all right?
No,
I just,
listen. You don't understand.
I'm kidding, Sir Ibrahim.
They say if you read, you will never be lonely.
Wow.
You will never be lonely. A lot of people are lonely, but if you, I mean, imagine your friend is Ibn Taymiyyah, because, and this is actually one of the most scholars that I really read for, and I sometimes read his writings over and over, because in order for you to understand, you really need to read it more than once. But imagine he's your friend. Imagine Imam Ahmad is your friend. Imagine Ibn al-Qayyim is your friend. All of these scholars, when you read their books, they become your friends. And you know what? There's something about it, is that you are actually giving them hasanat.
Wow.
While reading their books. Especially when it comes to Islamic knowledge, you're reading the book of Ibn Taymiyyah, you're raising his degree in Jannah. He is so grateful to you for doing so. When we read the Quran, Zayd bin Thabit gets so many hasanats for being the scribe of the Prophet ﷺ, because look at how many people read Quran, and all of them are in his book of hasanat. So these become your family. That's how I look at it. And so if I write on a book, I don't think I'm desecrating the book. First of all, my handwriting is beautiful.
Oh, nice.
So, nice. It's not bad. So when I write it, it becomes personal.
That's fine. All I care is that the audience understands that there are just many different ways out there. Like, you don't have to agree or disagree. I'm just telling you. Not you. You don't have to agree or disagree. Everyone does whatever system they like. But my bottom line is that writing is important, and it's part of solidifying and retaining the information. Because I was listening to some people who are saying that they have a problem. They'll read a lot of books, but they can't even remember that they read a book. And then they spoke to an expert, and the expert said, when you get to a point that you like, or a thought, or something that gets you to go to other places, he said, write it down.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I just don't want to, I'm OCD, like, as far as neatness and clean. I just don't want to write on my book. That's fine. And I never sell my textbook either. I don't understand these people. They finish the exam, you see them at the library getting rid of their textbook. How do you get rid of your textbook?
Or recycled bin.
I have all of them.
I can't believe it, man.
And I go back to them.
I feel horrible when I see someone throw in a book. It's like, why?
It's a friend.
It really is killing your friend.
Using your friend for a wobbly table, keep it.
Unless it's a phone book, that's different. But generally, it's really insulting. I get really hard feelings when I see a book being desecrated. It doesn't matter what kind of book. And that's just, I can share a story. When I was a chaplain at one of the prisons in New York State, and we used to receive books, religious books and texts. So we received a package addressed to the chaplain's office, and nobody is interested in the books, and they're like the Jehovah's Witness study books. They have the Bible with their commentary on it. They have other things. It's all Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And the pastor, he's not a Jehovah's Witness, he threw them into the trash. He threw them in the trash. These are religious books. One of them is the Bible. I went ahead and picked them from the trash and took them home. I know that I may never read them. I have a Bible, I read sometimes. But out of respect for the books.
But let's explain why you read it, like not for searching for wisdom or answers. Yeah?
No, of course not. I'm not saying...
Nobody gets ideas,
No. But this is important, that you respect the books. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran that we don't desecrate their gods or whatever they believe is sacred, so they won't desecrate our sacred books and holy books. like the Quran, for example. And that's why we put them in respectable, not that we agree with them, but it is out of respect for someone's, let's say, intellectual product or the way of thinking.
But Sheikh, both of the few, but Sheikh Ammar, he also brought a question, and he's mentioned graduation like 3 times. He said, after graduation, how do you keep reading? After graduation, how do you motivate yourself to develop a passion? After graduation, this and that. So there seems to be, in his mindset, a focus on pre-graduation, where you have a lot of free time, you can do whatever you like, you just have classes on Tuesday and Thursday, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can do whatever you like, you just study a little bit. But then after graduation, something happens, and all of a sudden, you lose your time. And you get a job, you get married maybe, you have kids. So my question to y'all is, okay, we're talking about reading and learning, but what is gonna motivate somebody to start learning while they're working? That's a big question. That's the elephant in the room. I think they need to be goal driven, and they need to have one mind, one goal in their head, and go after it. So
yes.
What's going to make them?
I don't know the answer to that because even for me, like if I have a topic to present on whatever, I'll read nonstop, and I'll read everything I can get my hands on.
Okay.
But if I don't have anything, I'm a completely different person. I'm not like constantly reading like that. But there's some things that I'm always by default driven towards. Like anything on psychology, I'm willing to read any time of the day. Anything on emotional intelligence or human behavior, I'm willing to read that anytime. So that I already have a passion for something like that.
So maybe like somebody needs to instill in themselves a goal. Like for example, he hears the hadith, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. Right? He learned the Quran. He wants. So now, if he doesn't know Quran as well, he's motivated now to learn the Quran. Why? Because he wants to teach it.
Right.
So now he's going to read this book, and he's going to read that book of tajweed. And
so there is. Okay, there is a reason why people go and study and graduate, because they want to have a career, they want to have a job. They don't necessarily like what they're studying. It's a job, it's something that makes money. They're not going to have a relationship with the material or whatever it is. It's not going to bring them joy, but it brings them money, brings them satisfaction, economic stability, financial stability, whatever.
Right.
But it does not actually satisfy their, let's say intellectual hunger.
It's not fulfilling.
It's not fulfilling at all. I mean, I can tell you that a lot of people who graduated from college are uneducated.
Yeah.
A lot of them are uneducated, and like I said, they cannot hold a conversation. Talk to them. They could just maybe speak a little bit about their field, but who's interested in knowing that field? It would be like a small circle that they can have a conversation with, but then it's all the same information. It's the same jargon. The word jargon means it's a language of a field. So just for people who want to know what jargon means, right? It's just a jargon that they use, but nobody speaks that way, right? Nobody speaks that jargon or that type of technical language. So when they are in life, they really need to educate themselves. And for a Muslim, they should have a different motivation. We know from the hadith that anyone who seeks knowledge of that which Jannah is sought, for other than the sake of Allah, will never smell the fragrance of Jannah. Meaning that you really need to be motivated by true intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you want to seek knowledge. And I really admire that you went on after you graduated, that you wanted to go and memorize the Quran and increase your knowledge about Islam and things like this. That is admirable. But not many people do that because they are busy with so many different things. And when you ask them about the arkan al-salah, they don't know what arkan al-salah, the pillars of salah, for example. What nullifies your wudu, they don't know what nullifies the wudu. And you get questions from people who are supposed to be very educated, but then their questions are, how could you ask this question, for example? I don't belittle anyone when they say that, but you really need to educate yourselves. So whether you go and attend a lecture, that's, let's say perpetuating your seeking knowledge, attend a lecture, or watch videos on YouTube where you learn from them, not silly videos, for example, or listen to an audiobook, and each one of them have their pros and cons, or have a book, or sit with a scholar, or sit with someone that you can learn from.
I think at all times you need to have, at all times, you cannot be stagnant. You must have something you're going after. You have to be racing towards it.
The hadith or the statement, كن عالما أو متعلما ولا تكن الثالث فتهلك. Be someone who teaches, or be someone who learns, and do not be the third, and you will destroy yourself.
Honestly, if you're not teaching, or you're not learning, or you're not going after something, like if you don't know arkan al-salah, you're not going after it, it feels kind of useless. Like you feel you need a purpose in life. So I think it helps you fulfill your purpose.
Go ahead, Sheikh.
No, I was just, go ahead, finish that thought, because I was going to ask Yusuf something.
The Prophet ﷺ says, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. An obligation, it has different levels, all right, depending on your status in life. If you want to be in Jannah and removed from hellfire, there is an essential knowledge that you need to have, and that is how to worship Allah correctly, how to avoid the haram, the prohibitions, and how to do the obligations. These are things that you must learn. And there's no excuse that you are not learning these things. There's no excuse that you're not increasing on a constant, even if it's just a slow rate, increasing your knowledge, increasing your ibadah, increasing your obedience to Allah, because you learn something new. And as we know, when you learn more, you become more, you have more taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you know and learn more. And that is what's required for you to go to Jannah. But if you are stagnant, you're only going backward, you're not going forward. And that's just religious knowledge, let alone knowledge that will make you will raise your self-esteem, make you feel valuable when you talk to people.
Right.
So Sheikh Ibrahim mentioned something that I wanted to mention in the introduction, I forgot, that you've memorized the Quran. And we know, and even though I don't like that, I don't think it's proper to always just introduce yourself as a hafiz and everything. That's a bit a cultural thing that we have here that's a little weird, but it's a fact, and we know that when you memorize, or studies show that when you memorize, your brain actually physically changes, like how it looks changes. Same way when you exercise a muscle, it looks different. Your brain actually looks different, and this was a study done on cab drivers in the UK and what have you. But so now let's just assume that you can memorize things, maybe better than the average person because you got used to it. Now, when you're reading a book, first of all, I got a question. I'm just curious. Because I know most huffaz, they can remember what side of the page it was on, the verse.
Right.
That happens with you, right?
Well, yes.
Yeah?
I mean, compounded by the fact, I read for a living because I practice law.
Okay.
So I can't make money if I can't read and write. I don't build things. So my tools of the trade is talking to you on the phone. That's how I make the money. So. But yes, you'll definitely remember where and all of that. And my teacher's advice actually was to use the same mushaf.
Yes.
And so I have the same mushaf from years ago. It's very used, etc. But eventually, the point is, you're going to stop opening the mushaf. You should just everything is from memory.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
And that's actually, it's known that your visual memory is the strongest part of your memory. So, and now, does that transfer to regular books? You'll remember what side of the page that statement was on, or?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely. English, Chinese. Oh, that's another thing. In Chinese, there's no alphabet. So there's no A, B, C, and you put them together and make like cat. It doesn't exist. Chinese, Mandarin, Putonghua, also, AKA, is a language of memorization, period. There's a picture. You not only have to remember how it looks, you need to remember how to write it with no hints. How to write it, how to say it, because it doesn't tell you how to say it. You have to remember it's, zhong. You have to remember that, how to say it, and you have to remember how to write it and how to say it, pretty much. So the whole thing is memorization in and of itself for every single character.
Right.
It's a picture, it's a...
It's very interesting. Unrelated, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I was watching a TED Talk, and this lady was presenting, the Chinese symbols. Then she showed the symbol for woman, and then she showed how you write the word argument, and it's two women. I thought that was brilliant. And you can't get mad at me. It's the Chinese folks who talk to China. Okay, it wasn't me. Okay, but getting back to our topic. So audiobooks. I have an issue with audiobooks. Okay, and I don't like when someone listens to an audiobook and says, "I read a book." Don't say I read a book. Say I heard it.
I heard a book, yeah.
Don't say I read a book. I know this one guy. He says, I read something huge, like 80 books this year. And I know what he did. He's playing on his Xbox while he's listening to it in the background. Don't tell me you read 80 books. Come on. You have heard 80 books. I'm fine with that. I didn't find any specific study on this, but I did find a lot of some of the experts saying that people who listen to audiobooks don't retain as much of that book as much as those who read it. And of course, like I said earlier, part of the strongest part of your memory is what you visually see, and that helps you. And then you don't, unless you have a notebook handy next to you, you don't really write and take notes and contemplate. For example, I have a thing. When you read, learn as you're reading. I mean retain as you're reading. Okay, read to retain. So for example, let's just pick an easy seerah book. You're reading Al-Rahiq Al-Makhtub. And we had a brother, I use him as an example. He would always, he will paraphrase the hadith. He will not remember the Sahabi whatsoever, and he will just call the Sahabi the brother. Do you remember the time when the brother said to the Prophet, what are you talking about? So one thing is, when you're reading it, take note of the companion that had the exchange with the Prophet.
Be intentional in your reading.
Intentional, yes.
Exactly.
I think they have names for it, active reading stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I'll tell you the truth, I looked up videos on reading techniques and stuff as far as YouTube. It was very weak. I didn't find anything good, really.
Reading techniques.
Yeah.
You mentioned the technique, visceral reading.
What
is that about?
Visceral reading, there's a book which is the most difficult book to read, is How to Read a Book. That is actually the most difficult book to read. And we had a book club that we started with that book, and I regretted that we started with that book because it was very difficult to read. So he mentioned visceral reading because he devised reading. He says in order for you to really grasp a book, you have to read it 3 times. The first reading is browsing. You browse the book, which means you have to, and that's a very quick, and that's a very easy way to deal with books that are unworthy of reading. All you need to do is just open the book, look at the table of contents, really look at it well, and then read the introduction. It's very important to read the introduction, and then read the conclusion if there's a conclusion, and read 1 or 2 pages in each chapter. You will have gathered about 60% of the book this way. But then visceral reading is when you go and start analyzing what you read, actively reading the book by taking notes and analyzing what you read. By the way, browsing is scanning. When you actually read, you don't actually read, you just scan. And that's what they do when you do a test. they tell you don't read the whole passage, just scan it to get answers. Do you get anything, any information from it? No. You may pass a test, but you come out of the test with nothing. So for you to read a book, actually, you really have to, and my way of reading a book is I look up the author and study him. Because I want to see if it's worth reading the book or not. There are people who make money out of writing books. If the author is a prolific author that writes 10 books a year, I just toss him. I'm not going to read a book that is authored by someone who writes 10 books a year.
Just read one of them, huh?
Huh?
Just read one?
Just read one of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
pick one. Yeah.
Read one. But I go and research the author. And then I listen to him on YouTube. Usually these authors have. And they give you a whole review about their book. They tell you what their book is about. Then you say, okay, this book is worth reading, you put it to the side. Like this one here, I heard the author. I spent about 2 hours listening to a lecture by him. And then I found this book is really worth reading. Why? Because this man spent 10 years studying the psychology of gratitude and doing research and doing all kind of things. And there are so many things that he came up with that align with Islam. And I said, oh, this is a book that I must read, right? So you have to be selective in what you read. So that's what I mean, because you mentioned visceral.
Right, okay.
So does that work for
analyze.
you on like reading a book 3 times? Does that work for you, like from the beginning? Because it doesn't work for me.
You're not going to read it 3 times from the beginning. That's not going to happen like this.
Are you saying, do I
Like
do
that technique? Okay, so again, everyone is different, right? And so the author suggested that, and it may not work for you, right? Does it work for everybody?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to work for everybody.
Good.
You said that you have interest. By the way, you and I have similar interests. I like to study human behavior. I've been reading on, the psychology of marriage for a long time now, for over a year, and read so many books, and I've benefited a lot from it.
How many books did you read there?
No.
Like 100 books or something?
No,
Really?
not 100 books.
There was a rumor that you read about 100
you,
books.
You came up with that rumor and let it slide.
Here's the rumor. Sheikh Ibrahim read 100 books
That's a rumor.
on marriage and understanding women,
No.
and now his level of understanding them is at 6%.
I can't. The Prophet ﷺ said that women will make the wise man confused, right? They will confuse a wise man. They won't confuse an idiot, obviously, but they will confuse a wise man. So,
And that's not an insult. It
so
says
if
a lot.
I am a wise man, I'm still confused.
MashaAllah. All right. Here's the thing. So I took a speed reading class, and I was actually top in my class. I was the fastest, but I hate speed reading. And basically, I don't enjoy it. Let me put it that way, more mildly. So basically, they train you. If I can borrow your book, you drop your eye in the middle of the sentence, and then with your peripheral, you pick up words from here and from there, and then you keep reading down the page like this. Then you go to the next page, and you're just picking things up. But then all of the training is to get one thing, and that is to shut off that voice in your head. Like when you see the word, room, when you look at it, you hear room in your head. So, and it's really hard. You shut that off, and now you're just scanning and picking up. And then they test you at the end of, you read 4 pages, then they give you a test, because someone can pretend that he's just skimming and he doesn't understand everything. You have to get, the answers right. So I have this skill, but I never use it because I completely thoroughly enjoy going through it and seeing why he chose a sentence structure this way, or how he explained this complex topic, how he broke down, the whole chapter in explaining this topic, why he used these words. And if I don't know a word, I look it up. If he tells a story about a man who was a coal miner and whatever, I go see if I can find the picture of the guy online, and I enjoy that. And I'll, from the beginning, go thoroughly. But I do want to say what you said earlier is so true. I met this guy one time, many years ago.
What did I say?
Here we go. I'm going to say it. He had a gigantic library. And when people come in and see a huge library, they ask you the same question. Have you read all these books? I have this huge library, and people see it and they're like, have you read all this stuff? Like, you think I'm Sheikh Walid or something? No. But they're reference books, they're reference books. So if I have a khutbah on this topic, I use them as references. Like one time my brother, he loaned one of my books out. Do you loan your books out? Let people borrow your books?
Yeah.
Yeah? Because you're kind, I would expect you to say that.
Do.
Do you loan your books out?
I lost one book actually. I'm still looking for it. I asked the person. He said, I don't know where it is.
You lost your friend?
I lost it.
You lost a friend,
One of my friends, yes.
I don't.
صفحات من صبر العلماء it's called.
Ooh.
One of the best books I've ever.
So now you have to show sabr for losing the book.
No, it takes sabr to actually not speed read and go in
It
detail.
does.
And if coal mining and you want to look into that topic a little, that takes lots of sabr. But I think speed reading is good to find what you're looking for, and then.
It is good. I just get bored
like
doing it.
multitasking. I don't believe in it.
Anyways, Sheikh, continue.
Speed reading, I don't believe in it.
So this guy said, so I just jumped from one story to another. So one time my brother loaned someone a book of mine. And I told him, why would you loan a book of mine? He said, because I never loan my books, and you can't loan my book first. He gave it to a guy. And he said, you're not reading it currently. Because I have the bookmarks and I have the things flying out of the books that I'm reading. He said, you weren't currently reading it. So yeah, but I'm not reading everything on these shelves, but they're reference books. I'll need to refer to it. And the guy took the book for over a year, and I actually did end up needing the book. And I went and bought another copy so I can use it for my khutbah and classes and all that. And then like a year and some months later, the guy's leaving the country, and I still praise him for that. Like he came before he went to the airport, like, here's your book. And I was like, keep
you
it.
have 2 copies?
No, I said, keep it. I got another one. I let him keep it. But okay.
I ask you for it.
So the other thing, what I was saying initially, that with the, I forgot what I was saying initially. So, but anyways, go ahead. Somebody else. I'm done.
I think you were saying like books are friends. They're like your friends.
No, I never said that.
I think that's what you were saying.
And that's fine if you see your book as your friend. Great. Enjoy your friend.
It is.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm offended that you don't see him that way.
Actually, I've had a sheikh tell me.
Honestly
A
offended.
Quran teacher. He said, buy yourself a small Quran. I said, why, Sheikh? He said, هذا صاحبك تضعه هنا. You're gonna put him here. He's your friend.
You
Put him right here. I said, Sheikh, what if I go to the bathroom? He said, and he's not for He said, you know what? Take it out, give it to somebody else, and then go in the restroom and come back and pick it up.
Right.
Okay.
And that's fine. Everybody's different. That's all. Like I would. Everybody's different. That's great.
Back to audiobooks. I think audiobooks are good with books that are not worth your time. And you're just going for a walk and you want to learn a few things here and there. You put an audiobook and you listen to it. You benefit from it, but then you finished it, you're not going to go read it again. But it enriches or affirms or confirms something you already know. But if you're reading something on a topic for the first time, I don't think an audiobook would be. Some people probably learn from it, but
I think a lot of people learn from it.
Even with lectures, I am very skeptical. It's a nature. So even with lectures, I have to go back, and if I am interested in the lecture, I have to go back and check on the references of the shaykh.
Oh, definitely.
See what he says.
It's NAD issue.
And I just want to know.
It's an Arab
whatever he's saying is true or not.
It's the Arab gene.
No, it's not.
Doubting everything. The guy doesn't know what you're talking about. He's like, لا ما أظن يا أخ. إيش عرفك؟
That's not what I meant.
I know.
I go and check so I can learn better. That's the point.
Jazakallah khair. Yes,
Right?
yes, it makes sense.
I want to bring up something.
Go ahead,
in
yeah.
This very masjid, something that sparked one of my learning endeavors.
Nice.
I was praying here, Isha, I believe. Either Isha or Fajr prayer. And no one was there to lead, so I led the prayer. And then I was reciting the verses, and then after the prayer, I'm getting up to leave, crossing through that first row, and somebody in the row, I'm not going to mention his name, but he gets me by the arm and he pulls me down, and he says, you need to practice with a sheikh. He said, you need to recite the Quran on a sheikh. That's what he said. I said, okay. It was hard. It was harsh criticism. But you know what happened that day? Then that very same week or so, I went to Sheikh Ibrahim.
Yeah.
And it was random for Sheikh.
We sat,
Sheikh was just
for a
chilling in the
months,
masjid.
right?
Yeah.
A couple of months we were.
Sheikh is usually business hours, you know, he's reading. But then he has me, and I'm like, Sheikh Ibrahim, you know, could I read something?
Jazakallah khair.
And then we read for I don't know how long, a month,
Yeah, but
2, 3.
it was 2 months, and I enjoyed these
Yeah.
these sessions actually. I really did.
Yeah, and he stopped
And
me.
you
He
really
said,
have a beautiful voice, mashallah.
He said,
Yes.
no, this is idgham and this is ikhfa.
Yeah.
And so I feel like something happened. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, intervened and He caused you to start learning.
Right.
I thought that was.
So you benefited a lot from
And
that era.
that's accountability. That's really shows self-respect.
Yeah, and then after
Right.
you, I moved on because you told me, at the time, you said you do not have the ijazah, right? So you said,
Oh.
also, it's an option. Yusuf, go. If somebody has ijazah, go, learn.
You give
Right.
ijazah, Sheikh?
No. I don't have ijazah either.
So he told, you know, he said, go and learn. And so I moved on to this teacher and that teacher and just kind of snowball.
I had 3 ijazahs recently. It was a 3-day weekend. I took Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. Ijazah also means holiday in Arabic. You know, by the way, on that topic, not to change the topic too much, but there is a sister who just moved to Houston with her husband, Sister Abir, and she came into my office to my wife and I, and she showed her ijazahs and her certificates and her degrees, and she has degrees for things I didn't even know you could get, you know, and she like recited the entire Quran in front of so and so, and then this ijazah, and it was just amazing. And she just started the class. They had the orientation yesterday, right here for girls at CLIC.
I saw the advertisement in the Facebook page or something.
You did, huh?
I saw Abir, what was the last name?
أيوة ما تحرجنا.
Okay.
But you know something? Like we couldn't in the advertisement talk about her qualifications. Like she is just beyond qualified to teach little girls, and what a great opportunity if you put your daughter with her. What a fantastic opportunity. Like I believe she is way up there as far as. And she praised your recitation, and she said you're accurate, which is a big deal.
Alhamdulillah.
You know, that's why I lit Dhuhr again.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Sheikh Ibrahim too. I remember we read here after Isha once, or after
Yeah.
Dhuhr, random day after Dhuhr. Just
Right.
caught him, say,
That's right.
Sheikh, let's do it was Ramadan maybe, we need to review. But
Okay, so we don't want to go for too long. Any other tips, techniques, anything else for, you know something? I love the idea of learning something new every day. And I don't mean like, oh, sharks have open gills, so they only sleep in water, underwater currents. Not that kind of stuff. Something beneficial, like something of knowledge every day. And I remember I used to have this for a couple of years where I would make sure that every day I learned something new, a new hadith or just a new something.
Right.
And one day I was super busy, and by the time I finally got to bed, turned the lights off, and then before I was about to sleep, like I didn't learn anything new today. And I have a book right on the nightstand, just turn the light on, read a hadith, put it away. But just people think like everything has to be in chunks, and it's not necessary. These little bits add up. And there are some people who are super busy, and they make sure they read a book a week. And I knew a guy, he's memorized the Quran, and he's getting his PhD, and he's working as a manager somewhere, and he's doing martial arts, and he would read a book a week. He'd go to the bookstore and get a book, and he would read the whole book every week. So it's about forcing time into your schedule, and also not necessarily looking for the huge chunks of empty space, because nobody has hours of empty time. But one of the videos, I was trying to see if there are any good videos like that I can refer people to. I didn't find anything good, but one video started in a very interesting way. The guy says, it starts off the guy saying, people don't read because they don't have time. He says, you're watching this video, so you have time to watch the video. You chose to be watching a video during this time. You could also have chosen to be reading during this time.
I mean, I'm sorry.
no, go Sheikh, go ahead.
The next best thing is I think if people are not into reading a whole book, there are actually summaries of books. You can find a summary of almost every worthy book. I mean, there are books that are not worthy. So you don't need to, you can find summaries of these books. And you can read, instead of reading 300 pages, you read 20 pages. And it gives you an idea what the book is about. I mean, you're getting by. You are still educated. You learn something, right? You read more this way. So there are summary books. And there are people who do that for a living, summarize book and post them online. There are also books that are on YouTube. You just watch the book being read in front of you, and you see the words. If you are not into reading, or if you stumble in pronouncing the words or things like this, that's another way of doing it. There are also books that are explained on YouTube. Like there is a book that I struggled reading. It's about the philosophy of science, which is very important if you're an imam and facing college students who want to ask questions about, the paradigm of science and atheism and all that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to read this book because it's important. It's about the philosophy of science, and it is really important. It's called epistemology. And I stumbled. It's not an easy book to read. So I found someone who explained it on YouTube and watched 6 or 7 videos, and I got an idea about what the book is about.
Wonderful. And then you went back to the book, or you were done?
I went back to the book, and I found, okay, it's not necessary.
And now you can handle it.
I like he followed through
That's
with
good.
his goal. He didn't
Excellent.
stop.
I
And
mean, there are books that are explained on YouTube. You can find that.
Sheikh was saying squeezing time for reading the book, and he just, read at least a hadith or something like that. Yeah. And I remember Sheikh Ammar, I keep going back to him, but he says, how do you keep yourself on a deadline even though you're graduated from college and there's no more deadlines? And so I was thinking, although you're done with your deadlines and there's no longer these tests and quiz and finals, you need to remember, and what keeps me going, is your life has a deadline. So
that's good.
You're like, whenever I have a goal, I'm like, I always making dua, Ya Allah, keep me alive to finish this goal. Wow. To get this certification, to get this and to finish, and so that's what has to keep you going. There's no guarantee.
Yeah, exactly, and I found a way. It actually improves your relationship with people when you start reading more. Mm-hmm. And how is that? When you start reading this, like for example, if you want to read about a certain group of people, let's say a certain culture, you'll gain more understanding about why they do things that way. Gain more empathy. And you learn something of their wisdom as well. And al-hikmatu dalatul mu'min. Wisdom is the lost treasure of a believer. Wherever you find it, you take it. That's a good proverb, an Arab proverb, I think, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, I found myself really, empathizing more with people when I read more, or when I, learn things about them, especially history. History is one of the best topics that you can read, and it's easy to read. It's not difficult. No difficult language there, and it's narration. You read narration. You read stories, and it enriches your understanding of certain cultures, certain people. So that is a good way to start. And what better way or history to read than the history of the Prophet ﷺ, his life story, and the history of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. You can begin that way and learn and have a lot of rich knowledge from that.
I have another motivator. At least this has worked for me, right?
Okay.
And if you surround yourself with very knowledgeable people, you will always have the drive to read more.
Yes.
If you surround yourself with guys, just, hey dude, you're not gonna, you're the smartest one in the group, and that's a disaster, okay? So, I remember this sheikh, this is when I was in my early 20s, and every time I would sit with him, I would always feel like I need to read more. And he was like he was just a few years older than me, but I would always feel that I need to read more. And every time I would meet him, I feel like, I need to read a lot more. And then, and he's a good friend of mine. And then some years later, I realized that I don't feel that way around him anymore, So that's one thing. You're sitting around people, mashayikh and ulama and what have you, or scholars or professors. You always feel like I need to read a whole lot more and not just, skim the surface or fake it, try to George Bush my way into being smart. It's not going to work. These things always fail. It's always fail. I was curious about, we don't want to take too long here.
Yeah.
One thing I like about lawyers, it may not be true, but I'm always satisfied with their English.
Mm-hmm.
And do they like go out of their way and learn grammar or vocabulary, or it just comes with the territory?
No, it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
You look at so many contracts, you look at so many pleadings and documents that you start memorizing the terminology. So I'll be texting my
Do they
family.
prevaricate?
What's that?
Do they prevaricate?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, sneaky lie.
Oh yes. Not sneaky lie, but they'll be very precise with their language, and if you don't read it too carefully, they'll get you by surprise.
Right.
So if you say, I had, an insignificant amount of Coke today, like Coca-Cola or something, or you want to say something like you want to, I had one or more fries or chips bags or something. You're just saying certain terminology to get around stuff. Definitely comes with the territory.
And there's a lot of logic in their examining when they're cross-examined.
Oh, very much.
Yeah, there's a lot of logic there, and you really have to be careful dealing with that, right?
Very formal. I think lawyers are. They are really running this place. I will tell you.
No doubt.
They understand the system, and they're running it.
A lot of the books that I read on human behavior were actually written by lawyers, or there's one of the books on reading people, and it was written. One of the authors was a lawyer because they need to read jurors. Which juror do I want on my side? Which one do I want?
Oh yeah, they read people. They
absolutely.
And then they can. If a client comes to hire you, you can just. So many people come through the door. Eventually, this person, is he going to ask for is he going to try to haggle the fee? If he has kids, if he's going to pay cash or credit, if he's lying to you. No, they lie to you all the time, and you know how to ask questions, and you really get good at that.
So that's one thing I like. I like when you can read about one topic, but you can find application in a completely different area or a similar area. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the technique, like in the Dawah workshop, I'll always say prosecutors use this in the courtroom. Lawyers use this in the courtroom. For example, I'll give you an example. You meet someone in the street and you say, this actually happened, this is a true story. So we were in Washington, D.C., and I told the guy about Islam, and he says, I'll never become Muslim. I said, why not? He said, I'm happy being a Christian. Where do you go from here? Don't be happy. I will make you happier. You can't do that. So this is a technique lawyers use. It's when you try to quantify. So for example, the guy will say, you worked for this company for 30 years. Yes, and I was a hard worker and I was a good employee. I was working for them for 30 years, then they fired me. So then cross-examination, the guy gets up and he goes, when you say you were a hard worker, what was your schedule? Monday through Friday. And you took every other Friday off? Yes. You worked 9 to 5? Yes. Did you work overtime at all? Not really. So basically you worked 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and you took every other Friday off. So now he quantified the word hard worker into what it really means. So now when the guy said, and this is a true story, when the guy said, I'm happy being Christian, what was the next obvious question? What is it about being Christian that makes you happy? And he said, Jesus Christ died for our sins. And guess what the rest of my talk was about? He didn't die for your sins. That's it. And boom, keep going from there. So that's a technique in the courtroom. Naam?
Or is that justice?
Or you can go anywhere you want, but now you have something to work with, right? So also applying things from here to there. That's why, for example, my psychology book from college, I still have it because even when I'm talking about salah and khushu', you go back to that book because there's a link between the physical position you're in and the spiritual
That's
condition.
what I'm talking about, alignment with Islamic principles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So somebody can use these techniques and
Right.
and to commit injustice,
That's
and
true.
to commit wrongdoing,
Yes.
and to obtain millions of dollars and get rich.
So basically, you're studying human nature.
Mm-hmm.
You could sublimate this human nature into goodness, or you could use it and destroy it into evil, right?
Definitely.
You know, I always tell the du'at, we don't do we don't need dirty tricks. We have the truth. I've got through all the books, I've got a whole list of dirty psychological tricks and stuff. But I tell them we don't need that, we don't use that. So we don't have any conniving or deceitful technique whatsoever. I got a question. If you're reading a book, you bought a book, you start reading it, and for whatever reason, by whatever definition, it's not a good book. You're 2 chapters in, it's not a good book. What do you do?
I mean, you need to.
What do you do? There's no wrong answer.
I like to finish what I started.
You finish it.
I like to finish what
Yeah?
I started. I'm not a person who's going to finish something and no.
And it's not beneficial to you.
It's tough, you know. Like
Yeah?
I love the answer. It depends, right?
There
But
could be something in chapter 7, huh?
you know, yeah.
Okay.
Really depends on the context and the content of the book.
What do you
yeah.
think, Sheikh? What do you do?
I don't read it. I stop reading it, but I don't toss it. I keep it, put it there, and at one time I'll reopen it again and see.
Give it another
maybe-
try?
Yeah, maybe
I like that.
misjudged
Okay.
it.
That's
Okay.
fair.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I like that.
عسى أن
That's
تكرهوا شيئا
Yeah.
وهو خير لكم.
I have 2 books that I hated, could not finish. Believe it or not, one of them was Malcolm Gladwell, Blink. Hated Blink so much. Like, just, what are you trying to say? Get it done. Khalas, say it. The whole book is just go, khalas already. So Blink I hated. There's another book called Sway. The whole premise was just nonsensical about motivation. And I used to search so much, try to figure out, and I watched every TED Talk there is on motivation and read every book on it, and then nobody's figured it out. And this book was the worst, talking about the elephant and the rider. I don't like stuff like that. Don't tell me elephant subta. Ma tqul li elephant. Give me something good. Don't tell me the elephant. So that book I couldn't finish.
The book that I disliked, and people probably know that book and like it, I really dislike it. It's called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From
Venus.
Venus.
That book is a rip-off asla.
Yeah.
The guy's not a psychologist.
Honestly,
he doesn't know anything.
Because I read the better book, and I found science in it. I found psychology in it. I found reasoning. I found something that will fill your mind. It will make you satisfied. And when I looked at this book, I said, "This is corny. This man is trying to make money."
It's garbage.
I mean, he came up with 5-6 books. Even children, he says now. Children, married to Mars and
I thought
it's
children from Pluto.
yeah, something like this. I don't. So the idea is there are certain books that gain popularity, but then when you come to the experts, they say this book is just money maker.
Maybe it's good to read it just so you can refute others. You know,
I understand, but
Yeah.
but there
Skim
are
the
books
rest.
skim the rest.
It's
well,
worth it.
He's using works of people who are not in the field. Like there's this book that's called "You Just Don't Understand," that's the name of the book. You just don't understand, and it's written by a linguist. She's an expert, and she dissected how men speak and how women speak and the differences, and came up with a theory. And he used that theory, but he made it into his own. And I don't know, he's a psychotherapist that made it into like different stories and things. So there are books that base their whole premise on a book that was done by an expert, and then people don't read that book, but they read this one, for example.
Earlier today, you said something that I liked and I agree with a lot. Sometimes the author makes his point, explains his topic, his discovery in chapter 1, chapter 2. Then the rest of the book, he's just reiterating and giving you stories and just trying to establish. So if you're already convinced about chapter 1 and chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's just him trying to drive the point home. And this is when you go
just
into...
to add more pages.
So some people go into skim mode at this point, like khalas, I'm convinced, you don't have to, khalas, ana ma'ak, don't worry about it, we're good. And they go into skim mode at that point. One of my favorite psychologists, Dr. David Lieberman, he said something That makes a lot of sense. He says when you go into a movie and it's a bad movie, this is, let's say, at the movie theater, and you don't like it from the beginning, you hate it, you hate the characters, everything. He said walk out.
Yes.
It's so smart to walk out because other people are like, I paid for this movie, I'm watching it. So you're paying for your own torture and you're wasting an hour and a half of your time over something you hate. He said, I hate a movie, I go out, I do something else that I enjoy.
Right.
And I can't stand people who sit there.
Let your loss be just the money.
Yeah. This guy's sitting there grumpy, hating on the movie, hating on the shattim wa yinabbis. Get out. Leave.
That's right.
All right. Any closing tips, remarks, so we can let people go home and they all have books they want to read? Shaykhana, you have anything?
I'd like to share a quote that I really like. It says, think before you speak and read before you think. So, if you need to think before you speak, you really need to read before you think.
All right, very good. Nice and poetic. Yusuf, what do you have for us? What do you want to close with?
I think just keep your intention in mind, because the intention is the driver. It's not what you're learning, it's why you're learning. It's literally that. I mean, if they don't know why, or they're not going to benefit from this discussion anyways. They need that push, So they have to clarify their why. So,
very good.
And keep the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and, make dua.
All right, before we go, does anyone want to add anything very quickly or a technique that worked for you? Or you want to, تفضل عمار.
I was going to say, is there any personal benefits you've seen, between reading e-books and reading physical books? That's something I've been having.
Okay, oh good. Jazakallah. Ammar is saying, is there any benefit you've seen in the difference between reading e-books and reading physical books, paper books? Yeah, that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about today. And there's some very interesting things, but I'll let you guys go first.
I mean, it's
e-books are easy to carry with you. They're on your phone. They're easy, but the problem with reading a book from your phone, you will always be distracted by your phone. You will always be checking the other book, not your book that you're reading. So, or the other things that you do on your phone. So that is a problem. The benefit that you can have by an e-book is that if there's a difficult word that you need to look up, it's easy to look up.
Absolutely.
And have it. Just click it twice and you'll get the meaning.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't have that benefit with a regular actual book.
Yeah, so I have an experience with, so I used to, 12 years ago, I was I had a project overseas, so I would come into America, teach a class once a month and go overseas. And I would always, my carry-on luggage was just loaded with books, okay? Loaded with books. And it's just a hassle every time. And then I taught a course, I can't remember what city, and they gave me a Kindle as a gift. This is the good old days when the Kindle was good. What Sheikh Ibrahim said, your phone is distracting. Now they have the Kindle Fire. It's just another tablet. This is the old Kindle that acted like a page. It was not a backlit screen.
black and white.
Black and white. You need a light to hit on it to read it. The battery lasted 2 months, and it did last 2 months. It's amazing. Okay, so remember that time I went back, I had 22 books in this thin, light thing. And what I liked about it was the following. What Sheikh Ibrahim said, you want to look up a word, boom, right there. Instantly, just touch of a button. The other thing I really liked about it is that if you know how sometimes you highlight a sentence because you liked it,
or you
right?
write a note or something.
Or write a note. You can write a note there, and as you're reading it, you can have this feature on, and it will tell you how many people highlighted that paragraph, and it will show you every highlighted sentence in the book. So it brings your attention to it. So for example, I'm reading one book, and then I'll see that 180 people or 360 people highlighted this and the last part of this paragraph. So it brings my attention to it, and I read it carefully. Now I was like, you know what, it is worth highlighting, and I would have probably just missed it. So there were some nice advantages there. But when it's fire and stuff, it just becomes another tablet. You got games, and it's just
Right.
it's different. Also, reading a backlit screen, whereas that really emulated the paper, and it was
Right.
a very similar experience. So I still like that Kindle, and its battery died, and I bought a new one and I installed it in it. I'm still gonna keep it. I still like that. It has a good,
Memory.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Anybody
Right there,
else?
right?
Oh, you got one right there, huh? And it's also one of the good old ones, right? Good job. Good job. Excellent. And it tells you what percent of the book you've read. That's interesting. Like it tells you you're 22% through. Great. Let me keep going. I like that.
Can I ask them a question?
Sure.
I mean, be honest, how many of you, after hearing this, are excited about starting to read or reading habit? Just show of hand. Okay, to see if we succeed. Just be honest,
MashaAllah.
to see if we succeeded. It really changes your life, I'm telling you the truth.
Now, how many of you were already readers? Put your hands down. Why did you put your hand up? He's saying who's gonna
Yes.
start reading now? You're already a reader, huh? Okay, all right. Ammar, you're already a reader. Good. You read, Ammar, huh?
I can tell you, people who read books, they will come across books that will improve their character. They will improve their self-esteem. And it will make them more compassionate towards other people. And that's, believe me, that I felt that in myself, because you start experiencing what the authors, great authors by the way, were feeling. Like Ibn al-Qayyim, if you read Ibn al-Qayyim, you become a soft-hearted person. If you read the books of Ibn al-Qayyim, just focus on him. And there's a book, Zad al-Ma'ad, I really encourage everyone to read Zad al-Ma'ad. It's also in English, if you want it. It makes you love the person, it makes you love the Prophet ﷺ, and improves your character. So that is the benefit of reading.
Shaykhna, but I have to push this point, man. Like, I don't understand that someone will read a book about, reading people and human behavior, and then at the end of the day, they're just a disaster to encounter. One of the reasons I hated NLP when it came out, neuro-linguistic programming, okay? I was like, what a ripoff this is. You read a lot of psychology books, and basically, the guy who invented NLP basically just took little parts from regular psychology and human behavior and created a new field called neuro-linguistic programming.
A lot of people do that, by the way.
And
self-help too.
Yes. And then you pay $3,000 to become NLP certified. And the other reason I hated NLP, I knew two people who are NLP certified, and I've never seen people worse with other people than these two. Like, you're certified, and you're going to certify me, and you don't know how to greet people, you're not aware of how you come off. So I really say, read a book to find somewhere to apply that information. And it's very important.
Exactly.
It has to impact you, otherwise.
And remember, maybe we should have said that earlier. I don't want to prolong the discussion. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu reminded us of a methodology of reading. He says we used to read 10 verses of the Quran. There used to be like 10 people, or how many people together. We used to read 10 verses of the Quran, learn them, memorize them, understand them, and then implement them, and then move to another 10 verses of the Quran. That was his method. So their attitude of reading was to understand and implement, not just for pleasure, like people do sometimes, which is nothing wrong with reading for pleasure, but still, if you improving your character is in mind, reading becomes worthwhile.
Your purpose. You go back to the purpose.
Exactly, yes.
We're going to close. Just a super yes or no question. Do you read fiction at all?
I do.
You do?
It helps.
Interesting. You read fiction?
I stick to nonfiction.
Not all the time though.
Okay.
When I feel like mental fatigue, I go and I have a few novels that I read.
You know what? I haven't read nonfiction in like 2 decades, and I thought it's out of the question. Yeah, I mean fiction.
Fiction.
And I thought it was out of the question to read fiction. And then one day, this sheikh that I respect, he was talking about, he was reading this fictional story, and I was shocked at that. But I do recognize some advantages, like you.
Have you read Dostoevsky?
Me?
Yeah.
I read Tolstoy. But what I'm saying is,
amazing.
their sentence structure,
These are not
the
these
way-
are not easy books. They're books that give you human understanding,
okay.
even though they're novels.
But I'm trying to say what the positive
Right.
of reading
Go ahead, I'm
fiction, لا عادي. And that is the way they structure their sentences. You're exposed to different styles of grammatical structure,
Right.
and I think that's very beneficial because sometimes you do technical reading and your writing becomes.
And it tickles a different part of your brain, the imagination.
All right, Jazakumullah khair. Jazakumullah khair. Anything
Thank you.
else, Sheikh?
Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Wonderful having you.